Girls of Reddit who have rejected people, what's the worst way someone has taken it? My sister got followed home by a dude she rejected. He went up to the house and started talking to her kids and telling them he was their new dad. Luckily, real dad came out. In his police attire. Put a real quick end to that. Edit, want to clear up some confusion. My sister and the real dad are married, not divorced or anything. The guy followed her home from the hospital she works at, where he was a patient under her care. He made a move on her, she said no, there was no relationship between them besides nurse, patient, well maybe not in his eyes. I refer to my brother-in-law as my brother, mostly cause I'm too lazy to type it out, but also cause he's been in my life since I was a little kid. Brother was not threatening the man as a cop but instead, as a father. He just happened to be getting ready to leave for work at the same time. The guy ended up getting transferred to another hospital to be closer to his family after complications from overdosing. What happened to him? This is a slightly different take, but I turned a guy down for a date and he then posted a long snap story about how much he loves his wife that he had neglected to mention all that time. Cheaters often do stuff like that when they feel guilty for trying to cheat. I had something like this before. Older guy the first was working a film festival with, at the opening night he said something along the lines of, you know there's something between us. When I ignored it he started loudly repeating how he wished he'd brought his girlfriend, clearly trying to save face. Called me an ugly whore and said no one would ever want to fug me. He didn't like when I asked how I could both be unfuggable and a whore. You should have asked him why he was asking out an unfuggable whore. I know this is bad but that last sentence had me laughing so hard. Then why were you trying? That feels like a good response if I ever need one. I had a guy do the same, he called me an ugly whore and told me I was nothing. I never really said anything back because I was scared and 12. He looked old enough to be in his late 20s. I had actually heard of a lot of people doing this before but I'd never had it happen to me, and when it did it was completely devastating. He told me I had to go out with him or he would kill himself. He then said goodbye, very convincingly and emotionally, and turned his phone off, stopped picking up or answering any texts. I knew him from when we went to high school together and so I actually had his best mates and his dad's phone numbers. I phoned them and sent the screenshots of the messages to them, absolutely hysterical and worrying that he was in a gutter somewhere. However, it was very quickly fucking discovered, by his livid father, that he was actually round a mate smoking weed, and he thought that this would at least get him a pity shag. What a complete and utter twat. Edit, hello. To answer the nationality questions, most of you were half right, I'm half Australian half English smiley face. I have kind of a weird accent from growing up in both countries. When I broke up with my first boyfriend, I was with him for 2.5 years, he went crazy, threatened to kill himself, locked himself in the bathroom etc. I had his mum calling me every night for a week saying he'd swallowed a load of sleeping pills, or locked himself in the bathroom with razor blades etc. She had the cheek to blame it all on me. Thankfully my mum set them both straight and the only time I heard from him again was about a year later when he came to the pub I went to every weekend with his new girlfriend to try and make me jealous. Then got jealous when I was talking to a friend who looks like a Viking. Quite pathetic really. We went on one date and I declined a second. A couple of days after that he called me and told me what I had been wearing that day. This went on for a couple of months. I'd literally never see him but at least 3 times a week he'd know exactly what I wore. WTF few. Who are all these pathetic and insane people? There is something seriously wrong about guys and girls like this. Who even behaves like this and thinks it is acceptable behavior? When I was a nanny, I was walking around with the baby in the pram and we visited a bookshop. A man in there started talking to me and then asked me out. Very kindly, keeping my father's advice in mind about being kind when I have to reject men when they ask me out, I said that that was a nice offer, but my boyfriend might not to be too keen on it. His response to that was to lean in and try and kiss me. I told him to get the fug off me, he then exploded with rage and started screaming in my face. I was saved by the bookstore employee, the man stormed out of the shop, I spent the next few hours shaking like a leaf. What a champion. That's fucking doubly scary because of the kid being there. Jeez. As a woman who's rejected lots of weirdos, let me give some advice. Never phrase it so that it sounds like you would if you weren't in a relationship. That's all they hear and they just fucking go after it. He was 15 at the time, and although the rejection happened over the phone, he was so irate that he illegally drove a car to the nearest place he knew to where my house was. I'd once told him I lived near the hospital, and waited there demanding I give him more accurate directions to my house. In retrospect, I probably should have been more terrified than I was. This happened to me once. I gave the guy very clear directions to a house in Florida. I do not live in Florida. That's like a hitman asking his target to kill himself to make his job easier. That makes no sense. By getting nudes from another girl, cropping her face out, and showing them to everybody saying it was me. He broke into my house and chased me into my bedroom, then spent 10 minutes shouting through my locked bedroom door that I should come out and have a reasonable conversation with him, adult to adult. This is almost exactly what an ex-boyfriend did to me in college. Please, I just want to talk to you. After smashing my bedroom window open in the middle of the night and trying to crawl through it. Fuck no. Edit, I'm a gay guy, not a woman. I was responding to how similar the comment was to one of my experiences, not to the original post. Because breaking and entering is what a normal, rational adult does after someone rejects their advances. Sure. He shoved me into a wall and busted my head open. I was taking a break at work behind the building listening to music and enjoying the breeze, and coworker I constantly tried to avoid because he was a creep started asking me out. I'd already been irritated because of shitty customers and the overbearing heat inside, so instead of the usual brush-off reply, I snapped at him and made it clear I was in no way interested, had a boyfriend whom I loved, and that he needed to get the fuck out of my personal space. I went to walk away and he grabbed my arm to twist me around trying to back me against the wall, and when I managed to finally rip my arm away, and press him back to get him off me, he got pissed, shoved me. Back of my head hit the wall, split open about 1.5 inches, bled a lot, had to get about 7 stitches, he got fired and also arrested for assault. He tried to say I had hit him first, but luckily there was a camera around back that caught the whole thing. Edit, okay, I did not think this would blow up like it did, and I went through the thread and thought I'd address some things. I apologize if advance for this next wall of text, but I'm on mobile. I was 19 when this happened and he was 21. No one really liked him cause he was a dick and thought he knew better than everyone, even though he half-assed everything and constantly got in people's way. He also asked out every female worker multiple times, and was really pushy about it, made us all extremely uncomfortable just to be around him, because he didn't seem to understand personal space when it came to anyone female. We were all constantly telling him to back off. We worked the same shift cause he kept getting rotated around for problems, and finally they left him where he was cause he only harassed me and I was the only one who didn't seem bothered, aka I didn't complain, which I realized later I should have, cause it might have gotten him fired sooner before this all went down. Because I was the only female on shift he'd always try to get with me, it never worked and I found ways to keep my distance. The day he busted my head open, the heat and long day combined, and I snapped at him instead of just walking away like normal, which was something he obviously hadn't been expecting, and so he grabbed me, and tried to hold me back while he yelled about me being a bitch. I ended up with a bruise shaped like his hand that I didn't notice till I got to the hospital. After he shoved me, and I hit the wall, I started yelling at him, and he was freaking out a bit cause for once I was actively standing up for myself and he started to realize what he'd just done. He only flipped out for real and started apologizing a minute when I reached back and my hand came back covered in blood. I went inside still yelling at him and our manager came over to snap at me until I told him what happened and showed him my bloody hand. He turned me to check out my head and panicked. Unfortunately for the idiot still apologizing, our uniform shirt was white, and the back of mine wasn't anymore. I know head wounds bleed a lot, but it looked like I'd been hurt worse than I was. I even freaked out at how much blood there was once I took off the shirt. I got taken to the hospital and the cops were called and they arrested him later. We found out he was on parole? Probation? For punching his girlfriend in the face earlier in the year and kicking her dog around afterwards. He was in jail for a good 7 years after the fact. All I did was give a report on what had happened and the tape proved my story. I never went to court. I was 19 and this really wasn't that big a deal to me. The injury wasn't that bad. I was in the hospital longer for questioning than anything else. I was almost completely stitched up before the police even came. All I had was a tiny hairline fracture, not even a concussion. I was more pissed off than anything. I didn't even think to sue, but I had bigger things to deal with at that point in my life than some idiot at work, and I sort of just moved on after everything. Sounds like he's going places, jail hopefully. In high school I turned a guy down, so he went around spreading rumors that he tried to fuck me, but my vagina was deformed and practically closed up. He spent the rest of the year talking shit about how nasty I was, unclean, unshaven, etc. Sometime about 5 years ago, he tried to add me on Facebook and I blocked him. Fuck that guy. I spent months trying to convince people I knew how to wash my asshole. Holy shit, I am so sorry that happened to you. Sheesh. Fuck that guy. I turned down a guy that was known for being the popular guy and I thought he was a bit of a dickhead. When he tried to kiss me I turned my head the other way, said I wasn't interested and walked off. He grabbed my hand, spat in my face and said I missed the best opportunity in my life and the only reason he tried to kiss me was because he pitied me. This makes me want to hit something. I'd gone out with a guy once that I'd met through a dating site, and we just didn't click. I told him exactly that, was very respectful of his feelings and wished him the best. He was not receptive. At all. He called me a whore, told me that he was going to find where I lived and push me into oncoming traffic, really awful things. He wouldn't stop texting me horrible stuff about how I was a gigantic bitch, a total CNT for leading him on, and that he hoped that someone raped me. I blocked his number, which thankfully stopped the messages, reported him onto the dating app, and thankfully never heard from him again. It was legit one of the scariest frigging things. Dude was unhinged. I don't understand that type of reaction. How hard is it to just say, fair enough, and move on? Nice guys. Guy asked me out during an Uber pool ride. I told him I wasn't interested and he started moving closer and asking me why I wasn't interested and what was wrong with him. It was uncomfortable to say the least. My Uber driver, for some reason, thought it was hilarious to see me pressed against the door to try and get away from this random guy invading my personal space. Thankfully no one has threatened my life. If using Uber Pool you should be able to rate the passengers as well as the driver. 1 to both for being a predator and a happy spectator. I work as a taxi driver. A few years ago during a busy night I picked up 2 passengers, a guy and a girl, that didn't know each other and I assumed they'd decided to share the fare to save money. During the ride it turned out that the girl didn't have any money and that despite offering to pay for her fare at the taxi stand the guy was now demanding to spend the night at the girl's as a thank you for the payment. The girl wasn't really into it and the guy was really pushy, basically saying that she owed to fug him for saving her. I'm not a huge fan of asshats like that and stopped the taxi by a bus stop and told the guy to get out. He protested as it was minus 20 degrees Celsius outside, but got out once I told him he'd either leave on his own or I'd remove him with force. I drove the girl home pro bono and checked on the way back to the city center if the douchebag was still at the bus stop as I'm not a huge fan of letting assholes freeze to death, but saw that he hopped into another taxi as I drove past. Fuck that guy and fug that driver. If I was driving and saw that I would slam on the brakes and make him walk. Edit. A word. He stopped his car in the middle of an intersection and just kept slamming his fists on the steering wheel. I used to know a girl who was traumatized and crying at Starbucks, I think, about how her BF was doing this but instead of an intersection it was a tunnel highway in one of the busiest roads in the city. They broke up about it. He sent me an email with a 3-page essay attached. It was written entirely in third person recounting his first rejection by a girl named Tanya at the age of 16. There were a lot of solitary beach walks, she's a perfect girl talk, him not talking no for answer and the story eventually ends with him drinking antifreeze, slipping into a coma, hospitalized and eventually recuperating. Only to tell poor Tanya that she could avoided his, and his parents' pain by agreeing to date him. The email said, so you know what you are getting into. I was 19 and did not see this extreme level of crazy coming but knew I needed to really make how I felt clear. I immediately called him to reiterate that I do not want to be with him, I no longer want to be friends with him and if he contacted me again I would change my number. I let a friend of his know what was going on. 5 days later he called from a different number to tell me he was out in the country one with a gun to his head and if I didn't agree to be with him then and there he was pulling the trigger. I lied and convinced him I had to leave because I had a family emergency, aunt sick in the hospital but we would talk the next day. Had mutual friend call him and report back as a suspected he was full of shit. Sure enough I was right, he was totally fine. He called the next day and with the most sing-song creepy serial killer tone said, you think you're so nice. What type of shitty human being doesn't agree to what someone needs when they tell you they're going to kill themselves? You piece of shit, I lost the plot. Told him I'm changing my numbers, and the next time he contacts me it will be the police involved. He just laughed the whole time and told me he hopes I die alone, like I deserve. Radio silence for 6 years until I'm getting married. I have an email from him, hey. Wow, it's been a while. How are you? Would be so great to catch up sometime, smiley face. Fucking psychotic asshole. Obviously I never replied and changed my email, again. I got the "how dare you do that when I threatened to kill myself" shit too from a guy once. He was holding a gun to his head right in front of me and I, by that time tired of suicide threats due to him being the fourth guy trying this shit on me, just said, fine, but since I'd be traumatized, I wouldn't come to your funeral. I knew very well he wasn't going to do it. After I left, I got a text saying how cold-hearted I was and how when someone threatens to kill themselves one has to hug them. It took months until I managed to get him to stop trying to contact me. Edit, since I got a lot of advice and a lot of the same question, let me add a few things here in advance so I don't have to answer individually. I was 17 back then. I was majorly depressed and suicidal myself, albeit without ever pulling shit like that because I never was and never will be this kind of asshole. I am 24 now, this is long over. I appreciate your worries, guys, but there's no need for them anymore. I went through therapy, I'm in a good place, it's okay. Yes, I was at first scared when he pulled out the gun, but it took me only about 30 seconds to take it from him because he was, overall, not a strong-willed person. Quite the opposite, actually. He was one of those people you could get to sit down by just screaming it at them. I had witnessed this at some point, so while I was scared, it wasn't too bad because I knew he'd never have the guts. The whole thing was more of a melodramatic Shakespeare scene than it was dangerous. I'm not even sure the gun was loaded, and when I took it from him, it wasn't cocked. In my head, I can't understand why these suicide threats don't play out differently. Man, if you don't see me I will kill myself. Woman, don't kill yourself, man. Where are you right now? Man, I'm at 15 Main Street. Woman, don't do anything rash. Stay right there. Less than hangs up greater than. Dispatch, 911, what's your emergency? Woman, a man named less than name greater than just called me and said he was going to commit suicide if I don't see him again. He is at 15 Main Street. I don't want to see him again, but can you send an officer over to make sure everything is okay? Suicide is one of those situations where it's legit to call an emergency number. If he's faking, having to talk to a cop might stop him from making threats. If he's not faking, it's better to get him help earlier. Plus it's all documented in the official record. I also once had a guy send me hundreds of text messages calling me all kinds of names, cursing me out and threatening me because I didn't have sex with him after our entirely lackluster first and last date. I didn't even bother reading beyond the first 50. Just let him go on and on until I blocked and mass deleted. Still, it was nuts. I've had this happen too. He then reappeared in my life as a stalker a few months later. He called me roofie bait and then followed me around campus for a couple months. What the hell? He told me he had considered trying to get me pregnant so I would have to marry him. My ex told me that he wished he had done this when I was drunker, when I caught him taking the condom off halfway through sex to try to get me pregnant. Chased my car down the major city street as I drove away, running after me until he collapsed in the road, called me dozens of times, eventually blaming everyone from my little brother to my dentist for breaking us up, then flew to his hometown the next day and committed suicide. His extreme clinginess and jealousy was the reason for my decision to take a break, and though clearly I made the right decision, I felt terribly guilty for years. Edit, details. Edit 2, it's been 20 plus years, I'm fine and happily married now. Thank you for all the supportive and thoughtful responses. Must have been one hell of a dentist. From the unpopular standpoint of a guy who once tried to kill himself after a bad breakup, absolutely not your fault. It's weird to look back on it now because I'm older and hopefully wiser, but yeah. People like that will find a reason eventually. Edit, unexpected amount of responses. Thank you all. Explain the story in response to someone below. Edit 2, WAAAAY more responses than I thought this was gonna get. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody who finds themselves in the same position if they think it might help. Please feel free to PM me. I'm so sorry you went through that. Totally not your fault in any way. He killed a stray cat that he found was taking shelter in his basement. He later told me it was my fault and that I had caused him to do it. I wish he would have just threatened me directly or started some bullshit rumors, not kill an innocent animal over it. Hopefully he'll be haunted by that cat and it will knock over things in his house at night for all of eternity, ensuring he never gets a decent sleep and constantly thinks someone in his home. He was gonna wreck some pussy one way or another. Back in high school, he pretended to want the same friendship I was looking for. He ended up locking me in his room, threw my phone out of reach, and sexually assaulted me until I worked my way free. As I sat in my car, he casually walked out, handed me my phone, telling me he'd text me later, and I got to learn to live with him in classes while he acted like nothing ever happened. Edit, I expected this to get buried, but I wanted to clear up what happened afterwards. I didn't report him because I considered him such a good friend for a considerably long time. The experience, luckily, did not amount to rape, which is why I'm using the term sexual assault. At the time, I wasn't entirely sure it was sexual assault. Things like, maybe I asked for it, or I'm just overreacting, ran through my mind. It was a year afterward when I finally came to the realization, and by that time I both didn't care and, sorry to say this, didn't want to see a kid who was successful in college and in a healthy, long-term relationship be brought down by rumors, not what I want to call it, but what a majority of the world would today. This isn't a great answer, but it's the only answer I have for my inaction. Holy fucking shit. May all the pervs and rapists spoken of here rot in jail. Went into a gas station to get my mom some lottery tickets and the cashier asks for my ID. While holding my ID, he begins questioning my marital status among other personal details. I told him I wasn't interested and paid. He gives me my ID back. I go to the car, start it up and begin to tell my little sister what happened as she was waiting in the car, and she starts yelling that someone is coming over. Now the cashier is tapping my window and yelling, "Are we friends?" I put the car in reverse and drove away. While I don't know for certain who did it, the next day I had my tire slashed. I was told that the way my tire looked seemed like it was most likely intentional. Unfortunately, this was like 8 years ago, so I no longer have the picture of the tire. As a precaution, I had some of my male friends go by and tell him to leave me alone. I never went back to that gas station and didn't have any issues with the guy after that. The worst part was I was 18, and when I told my mom what happened regarding the guy harassing me, she didn't believe me. Fuck you, Bill. You're single because you're a creep. When I worked retail, there was a creepy guy that came in to send a fax who started saying weird shit, then started coming to the copy center multiple times a week. I was 18 and had no idea how to handle it, so I started hiding when he came in, which all of my managers and coworkers supported. I found out the hard way that he worked at the gas station across the street. I went in to pay for gas, and as I was leaving he screamed, literally screamed, with a lot of customers in line, "You're mesmerizing." Luckily my managers never let me leave the building alone, and I never saw him again, but fug, it was scary. I was spending time with an ex because he insisted he needed the company and we were still on friendly terms. I ended up having to kick him out of my house. He was acting crazy, keeping me up in non-sexual ways, talking and shit when I told him I needed to sleep, and would kick him out if he continued disrupting my rest. He spent the following 3 days sleeping outside of my house and only left to get suitcases of his shit, which he subsequently left by my back door. He would repeat this routine every few months until I moved, insisting that he would hold my bike hostage until I stopped being a bitch and let him into my house. Needless to say, he never set foot in my home again. I'm pretty sure that what the police are for. He spread rumors about me at work that I fucked all the guys there and people believed it. How does that work? Do all the guys think they were the only ones left out? I'm a guy and I see this comment a lot here. It really does seem like a common tactic that rejected guys love to use all the time. The same type also love to act like they never wanted something when they feel like they can't get it, or they trash something they failed at, like say a job, set of tasks, or even some kind of exams or assessment. This thread helps explain why some women have trouble saying no. It's a defense mechanism. So many creeps think women love their come-ons because we smile and laugh before getting the hell away to safety. Women's appreciative reactions are logical and placating. Smiling and being vague instead of saying no lets you extricate yourself without setting off a potentially dangerous situation. Don't know if this even counts because I was in 5th grade, but some acquaintance of mine confessed, and when I rejected him he slapped me across the face. Then he started harassing me and my younger brother, until my best friend, still friends to this day, beat the shit out of him. That's quite intense for elementary school. Neutral face. The old "you're actually a dumb whore" who I didn't like anyway after he wrote a letter expressing his feelings about me. I politely told him that he showed a lot of courage but that I just wanted to be friends. Worst part, he was my work-study partner. I was 19 years old. Looking back, I should have contacted my boss who would have done something about the work partnership. A guy on OkCupid had messaged me a few times, and I told him I wasn't interested. After the third time I asked him not to message me again and he threatened to track me down and anally rape me. He was also old enough to be my father, so there's that. Backpacking with my girlfriend, we are both women, and staying in a hostel, 6-bed mixed dorm. All is well until it is just me, my girlfriend and an old Indian guy in the room who is ridiculously drunk. We ordered pizza that night and he started shouting at us for not ordering him pizza in the common room. Eventually he started telling people he wanted to marry my girlfriend, asked me if he could marry her, to which I said no, go to bed, you're drunk, etc. Anything to get him away from us. We went to bed eventually. He kept talking and talking about how much he liked my girlfriend. I asked him to stop, he was making her uncomfortable, and repeatedly said go to sleep. Which he didn't. He proceeded to start masturbating over me and saying my girlfriend's name, as I was bottom bunk, my girlfriend was top bunk. It was horrible. My girlfriend threw a bottle of water off his head and we both ran out of the room to go to the reception desk to complain. He followed us. We had to complain about him masturbating while he was stood there. He flipped the fuck out. Threatened to murder us both, said he would kill the guy on reception, kept saying, why would I masturbate over you, you're disgusting. The hostel kicked him out, gave us a private room, but he stayed and argued for hours, even the police had to come. So I really liked this guy in high school. He was kind of edgy and I was a pretty good kid. He asked if I wanted to skip school with him and naturally I was all for it. I walked to his house after getting dropped off at school and we watched movies. He eventually turns on porn while we are kissing, making out, and tries to put his hand down my pants. I was really nervous because I was a virgin and hadn't even touched a penis or anything. I found my way out of there pretty quickly. I kind of just stopped talking to him, really, because I wasn't ready to have sex. And he decides to tell everyone he took my virginity and I was bad in bed. I was mortified. He's now a meth addict, so. The ones that will have the worst story possible are not able to comment here. Not because they are not on Reddit, but because they are not alive anymore. Unfortunately, there are too many. Imagine losing your life in such situation. You lost your precious life cause some entitled asshole can't take rejection. It boggles me. I have access to the student files. I know where you live. A few weeks later there were reports of a guy looking into windows around my neighborhood. Thank God he got caught before he escalated to a B&E or worse. Stalking, slander, threats of rape. I was 13 and I basically told this really old dude to screw off while he was stopped at a light shouting shit at me. Light went green. He speeds off, U-turns wildly, then comes speeding back and threatens to shoot me. Then there was this other guy at a concert who didn't take no for answer. He pinned me against the wall and only scurried away because the police crashed the concert at nearly the same moment. The worst one about that was my friends just watching it happen, doing nothing. Friends. I went on a terrible date with a coworker. He got wasted and really embarrassed himself and me in front of a lot of people. I share a lot of my life on the internet and I draw the line at going into detail of what happened that night, that is how bad it was. The next day, I gave a different male coworker a ride home, which was something that happened every Wednesday. The guy the first went out with followed us, confronted our coworker and his wife about the affair I was having with him, I wasn't, cried, and pulled an actual white picket fence out of the neighbor's yard and threw it at the dude. The police were called, it was a whole thing. The best part of the story is that the good coworker was given a promotion so that he was the direct supervisor of both myself and the jerk. I didn't have to work with the jerk too much longer after that. My current girlfriend has a 6 inches cut on her left thigh after her ex assaulted her with a knife in an attempt to rape her. As they fought, she yanked out the knife and held it at his throat to force him off her. The fugger is serving 7 years in prison. She yanked out the knife and held it at his throat. Fuggin' metal as fug. I'm a girl in the National Guard. Now, the Army's got this shit called SHARP, TLDR, the Army's attempt to do CYA for sexual harassment, assault. Half the time, it fugs up and lets shit happen, the other half of the time it throws the book at someone so hard they end up under the Library of Congress. Keep in mind, this dude's doing this with that hanging over his head. This Navy Reserve dude I worked with tried to ask me out. I told him nah, forget about cuz that wasn't my jam. He was weird, so no. I worked with him, bigger no. I play on his team, bigliest no. So, he didn't take it well. Started stalking me. As in, he managed to find out the name of my dog, what apartment block I live in and the name of my girlfriend. Figured out who my tattoo artist was. Managed to find out the exact make and model of my bike, and I never took it to drill. Ever. For fug's sake, the dude found out the name and specialization of my major professor. So I'm weirded out as fug at this point, because he showed up to our section one day, told me he knew all this, and that I was gonna go out with him or he was gonna tell my platoon sergeant that I was being sexist towards him. So, remember SHARP. Every unit's supposed to have a SHARP EO rep, a point of contact for sexual harassment, equal opportunity shit for that unit. Our unit's rep? My platoon sergeant. I just let him go, because fug lets have platoon daddy hear about how Snuffy here is stalking the shit out of me, just makes SHARP EO shit easier. After some fun paperwork, this dude managed to talk his ass right out of the Navy. I didn't overtly reject this guy. He just realized I didn't like him back. We were 10 when this started, so he physically assaulted me and harassed me until my parents told the school they were going to sue his parents and subpoena my entire grade, forcing the principal to deal with 60 sets of angry, entitled parents, unless the administration separated us. Although that was pretty tame next to what my mom's high school boyfriend did when she broke up with him. That guy showed up at her apartment with a gun. Recently I passed a homeless man that catcalled me without acknowledging him, so he followed me for 2 blocks while calling me a bitch every 45 seconds. When they beg. It's just a really uncomfortable situation. I was celebrating my friend's birthday and he insisted on walking me back home before popping the question. I politely told him I wasn't interested. He proceeded to plead and beg, saying that it was his birthday and that's his birthday wish, lol, and how I shouldn't ruin his birthday. I politely declined, over and over again. This continued back and forth until I saw one of my friends walking by, and I instantly called him over. Without thinking I introduced the two of them and promptly went, I gotta go now, bye, and went inside and locked the door. Edit, TL, doctor, he faked a seizure. This happened a few days ago. You should know that I'm a gym nut. I go at least 5 times a week and train for around 2 hours, either in the weight room, or with teachers during some courses I like. So this time I was in this room with some other people and a teacher, and we were doing a boot camp style training. There was also this guy, who's clearly not right in the head. I don't know what he has precisely, but it's pretty evident that he's not functioning normally. He also has epilepsy, and has had a seizure during fitness class before. Nobody really talks to this guy, but I try to be kind to him. I greet him when I see him, talk to him about training, you know, just small talk. Apparently he took it as flirting. I was appalled at the way other women blatantly ignored him, but now I know why. So, just before class, he came up to me and said, "Finally I've learned at what times you come to the gym." Creepy as hell. Anyway, I chalked it up to his less than average social skills. During class though, he started wanting to be paired up with me, tried to help me even though I'm way more fit with lifting, and constantly invaded my space. When he broke the touch barrier, I had enough, and sternly told him that he was being inappropriate. The instructor saw what was happening, took him aside, and prevented him from bothering me again. So, why am I telling you this story? 'Cause after I rejected his advances and the teacher moved him to another part of the room, he fucking faked a seizure. At first he was kinda believable, and we called the owner of the gym, who knows him and always handles these things. But then, he stopped seizing long enough to tell me, "You see? This is all your fault, you slutty girl." Then he resumed, far less convincingly. "I've never seen anything as cringeworthy and sad as this. A friend of mine in college broke up with her boyfriend. He for some reason rented a full-body bunny suit as part of a surprise to win her back. She left him crying alone in a bunny costume on his bed. Kind of sad and funny. Maybe not rejection op meant in the strictest sense, but when I broke up with my boyfriend of 2 years, he burst into snotty gut-wrenching tears and started dry heaving, and then that night after I moved all my stuff out of the apartment he kept calling me and hanging up as soon as I answered. Finally didn't hang up when I answered at 3 a.m. He threatened to kill himself. For weeks he left me things in my mailbox, little presents like candy, CDs, a game. Threatened to rape me if I wasn't going to have sex with him willingly. So rape or rape then? If you're under duress because of a threat of bodily harm, you can't really consent. ITT, why women often can't just tell him no. We're not trying to lead men on by being nice. We're trying to protect ourselves. I finally managed to dump my emotionally abusive ex for the last time, and a couple weeks later he found out I was staying at my mom's. One night he hid in the bushes in her garden and waited for her to go to bed so he could knock on my window and give me a bag full of presents. 6 months later his mom rang me and asked when I was going to put him out of his misery and get back together with him because he was becoming unbearably depressed. It's literally been 6 months of absolutely no contact. Why the fug are you all still waiting? Joined the army to get his hands on a firearm, which he then used to threaten my life. Joke's on him though, as joining the army is a bit more than just a free gun. Edit, he joined the military and is currently serving. Not denying the fact that he's a complete idiot. I blocked his number and he ended up in a different state, so haven't heard from him except seeing Facebook posts from his family. It looks like he's doing well and I genuinely hope it was a positive life change for him. Guys, dude, my date was fat IRL. Girls, my date threatened, hurt, raped me. Never anything incredibly insane. But last week, this guy sent me messages on all social media and texts before I blocked him, calling me names and generally being hateful. Yeah, really felt like I missed out turning down that charmer. Didn't happen to me, but to a friend of mine. Guy on her floor asked her out by buying her cake and writing a letter. She said no, so he crumpled the letter and ate it. He let her keep the cake though, which was nice. I was pregnant, out celebrating my birthday with my partner. We had been for dinner and decided to call in at a bar where all of my friends were, as they wanted to wish me a happy birthday. Just before we left I headed to the bathroom, and my partner and friends went outside for a cigarette. On my way back from the bathroom a guy stopped me. He said something about my boobs, then attempted to motorboat me. I grabbed his chin and pushed his face away from me and went to walk away. He smashed a pint glass into the side of my face and punched me in the head several times. I was lucky that there was a table behind me that I was able to grab onto, or else I'd have fallen to the floor. He was thrown out by the bouncers, but it was up to myself and my friends to call the police to report what had happened. He was arrested, it went to court, he was found not guilty of sexual assault and he pleaded guilty to assault. He didn't get any jail time and I got £180 compensation, which I received in 1p monthly payments. I've got 2. 1. A friend who had feelings for me who I rejected 5 years ago wouldn't stop trying to bring it up nicely to convince me. I stopped talking to him, but periodically he adds me on Facebook, which I reject. 2 weeks ago, he found my Instagram and added me. We haven't talked since I made it very clear that it was a no. He's never been threatening, but it's just so frustrating that he keeps trying. 2. My ex tried to booty call me post-relationship and I turned him down. He kept texting me after I stopped answering for the next hour. He'd started the attempt by implying I was a slut. And he got engaged to the girl he was dating when he did this a month later. Like when they threaten to rape or kill you. Or when they follow after you even though you've said no.